Alright, before I start talking, I just want to get out of the way. I've only seen season 1. I only started watching the show because it's finally available on Netflix. And I'm talking about things that characters did in season 1, and only season 1. I know I just said that, but I'm making it clear again, and I'm going to use specific examples, so that way nobody can think I misunderstood the lore or something. This isn't lore, it's just how characters behave, and they behave kind of dumb sometimes, and it's weirding me out. So I want to talk about it. But let's go to example number 1. This one requires almost no context, so even though there's a lot of context in Korra necessary for most of these, this one you can understand immediately.
Why would there be fence posts but no fence?
Okay, so I think you probably got this one without me needing to say much, but I'm gonna drive the point home. These are 3 people sneaking into a place. They see fence posts, but no visible fence. All 3 of them decide to walk between the fence posts at the same time and are promptly electrocuted. They're dumbasses. But let's add additional context, just in case that wasn't enough. You see this guy in the middle? This one being electrocuted right here in the middle, he's a general, like the general of armed forces. And he thought it was okay to walk between these fence posts, all at the same time, knowing they're sneaking into a military complex. And maybe, you know, you still think you have a pretty good defense. You're like, why would they expect magical lightning to shoot out between the fence posts? I believe I've already established that they're entering an enemy military complex, so they should be careful no matter what, especially around fucking fence posts, but I'm gonna go a step further. In universe, they're tracking down who's essentially a crazed inventor to stop his evil war machines. An evil inventor who's really great at inventing new ways to hurt people with electricity.
Why would there be fence posts but no fence?
This is Amon. He is the primary antagonist of Season 1. He, too, is a dumbass sometimes. He runs an anti-bending cult called the Equalists. He believes that bending really is the source of all evil and inequality in the world. Bending is this magical thing people in Avatar and The Legend of Korra do, where they manipulate elements with their natural instincts and emotions and whatever. Basically, they just move stuff. Okay, they move water, fire, earth, and air, and extensions of those things. And, of course, people who can do that are more powerful than people who can't, hence the concerns about inequality. You get the picture. We're going to start talking about more overt spoilers now. So Amon invented this backstory where his family was taken from him by a firebender, and he hates benders, and benders are all that's wrong with the world. People who can manipulate the elements are responsible for all the inequality and suffering, is what he says. And he has the power to take their bending away from them. He was bestowed this power by spirits. But that's actually a lie. The reason he can take their bending away from them is because he can manipulate their blood, because he knows blood bending. I don't care if it sounds stupid, that's the in-universe explanation, and I'm not talking any more about it. That's what you need to know. He can take away their bending because he himself is a bender, which is quite the conundrum. And if anyone found out he was a bender, they would be upset, because he's anti-bender, or is supposed to be. Bloodbending is an extension of waterbending, so all he does to keep his story straight is he never waterbends or bloodbends in front of other people in a way that they can tell is bending, and he has a burn mark on his face to corroborate his story about how his family was killed by firebenders. It seems like that would be kinda hard to fuck up, doesn't it? So after a fight scene, Korra, the main character, knocks Amon into the water. Amon's drowning, and his burn mark paint is falling off, so what does he decide to do? Waterbend in the most ridiculous way possible to expose himself. Look at this shit. And I know you're saying, look at his face. That was a gut reaction to drowning. He didn't intend to do that. That's some bullshit. Do you see the kind of shit he's doing? He made a giant tower of spiral water. This is a guy who's put himself in countless immediate life or death situations for his cause before. But let's say I'm being a little unreasonable, and maybe this is just a gut reaction, and I don't understand exactly how the psychology of bending works. Why is his burn mark fucking paint? Why is his burn mark paint? Why did he not just burn his actual self? It being paint is such a bad idea. He'd have to reapply it in exactly the same way every time. He'd have to hold that, oh, I just ate something way too sour facial expression to make it look like his lips got fucked up. He started a cult and successfully took over a city on his radical ideological beliefs that bending is the source of all evil in the world. He can't afford to burn his face for that cause? Come on. You're a really bad liar, dude. This is Tarrlok. Tarrlok is the secondary antagonist in Season 1. He hates the Equalists. He hates Amon. He wants to get rid of Amon and the Equalists. That's his thing. He looks at non-benders in kind of, but not really the same way that Amon looks at benders, and it leads to some ironic tragedy shit later that we're not going to talk about. That's not what we're here for. Tarrlok is manipulative, and for the first 7 episodes of the show, he does things pretty smart. He does things within the law, he manipulates people pretty openly, but he's not doing anything illegal. He's just being smart, snaky. Things like having someone make a statement in public where they're less likely to say no to his proposal, you know, stuff like that. Up until episode 8, he has a largely inconsequential relationship with Korra, neither very positive or very negative. Korra was previously part of his task force, and now she doesn't want to be again for some reason she doesn't make apparently clear, but she says that Tarrlok is a manipulative bitch, and that's why she doesn't want to do it, even though she didn't seem to hold that opinion just a minute ago. But it doesn't matter. So Tarrlok can't have Korra back on his task force, which is a bummer, I guess. And Tarrlok perfectly legally arrests Korra's friends because he wants Korra to join his task force. And, you know, he's holding her friends as leverage to do it. We're not going to get into how he arrested her friends. It's complicated, but it is legal. That's the important thing here. He hasn't done anything illegal yet. And more importantly, he hasn't done anything explicitly stupid. He holds so many cards. He's in the best position. He probably has the most power of anyone in the city right now besides Amon. So what does Tarrlok do when Korra again refuses to join his task force even after he kidnapped her friends? He decides to physically attack Korra, and this is the entire reason everything goes wrong for him from here on out. He makes an uncharacteristically awfully stupid decision to physically attack someone else. Then he wins the fight, kidnaps Korra in such a way that there's no way they won't find out it was him. And everything just collapses. He loses all of his power, all the cards he held, all of his status. And the thing is that he had the upper hand in every conceivable fashion. I cannot express how many events were set into motion by this really stupid decision that he has no reason to be making. He's shown in the rest of the show before this to be perfectly calculating and patient and not to strike first, but I guess, like, the plot wasn't moving the direction it needed to, so he started acting like a dumbass. When you get the big tragic reveal about Tarrlok later, it also contradicts with this moment. Like, who Tarrlok is as a person doesn't make sense with him being violent. This is Hiroshi Sato, yet another secondary antagonist in the first season of Legend of Korra. He's an inventor and is secretly supplying the Equalists and Amon with weapons. Mostly electrical weapons like that fence from the beginning of the video. But on the surface, everything's fine. All of his industry is perfectly legal. He makes automobiles and he's sponsoring a sports team, a bending sports team. So there's no reason for anyone to suspect him. Like, it would be really hard for him to fuck this up. He's got an absolutely amazing lie going. But, you know, in one episode, Korra overhears him say something vaguely sinister on the phone. So that's enough reason for other characters to start doubting him for some reason. Korra and company go to great lengths to be irrational. They search all of Hiroshi's factories, of course finding nothing, and then someone slips Korra a paper. This guy says, "I'll tell you the truth, just meet me under the bridge." And he says, "Oh yeah, Hiroshi's definitely developing weapons." And for some reason, they all believe him, even though he provides no real evidence beyond his word, and he's just a guy. They don't know. They don't even have his name. but his say-so is enough for them to go barging into Hiroshi's mansion and digging underneath it looking for a secret weapons factory. Just in case you need it said again, one time Korra heard Hiroshi say something very vaguely sinister over the phone that could easily have been business talk, but that's enough reason for everyone to search Hiroshi's factories, and then some dude slips Korra a paper, and that random dude who happens to work for Hiroshi, his say-so is enough for them to search further, this time under Hiroshi's actual mansion. The only way this could be dumber is if Hiroshi planted that guy. It's just unreasonable. Which makes it extra dumb that Hiroshi did in fact plant that guy. And even worse, the guy he planted was telling the truth. I want you to let that fucking sink in. Hiroshi planted a guy to tell the suspicious people exactly where his secret evil weapons factory was. He could have planted a guy who told them a lie. The guy he planted could have easily given them false information, and then they'd act based on that false information, and their reputation would be ruined, and they'd have to drop the investigation. Or better yet, Hiroshi could have done exactly nothing, and he would have been cleared, because the investigation was already fucking over, and no one had any more reason to suspect him. Up until they got that lead that Hiroshi planted, Korra's company was like, yeah, I think this Hiroshi guy is actually innocent. Let's drop the case. Hiroshi clearly didn't do it. He's on the level. We were dumb to suspect him in the first place. But then because of Hiroshi's own planted messenger, they're led directly to his weapons factory. And surely you're thinking, Hiroshi definitely planted that guy for a reason. He wanted them in his weapons factory. And you're right. So he must have some kind of genius master plan or sinister trap set up, like a really, really genius one. I'm still not sure I'm making it as clear as I could, so I'm gonna say once again, Hiroshi was so unbelievably innocent that no reasonable person on the planet Earth would actually believe he did it, and yet he led the good guys to his secret weapons stash anyway. I'm just making that clear. So let's see what Hiroshi's plan was after the good guys show up at his secret weapons lair. He's gonna attack everyone with mechs. That's his plan. He's gonna assault everyone with the intent to kill using giant mechs that he made for the Equalists, and he's piloting one, personally. I think I'm developing an aneurysm in real time, but in spite of that, I still want to talk about why this is dumb, in case it's not obvious. So, even if Hiroshi went through with this dumb, stupid dumb plan to lure the suspicious people into his secret weapons factory, there's no reason for him to personally be piloting one of the mechs. Hiroshi's passed so many barriers of stupidity at this point. Like, I can't even count them all. There are so many ways this could have gone. Like, optimally, he just would have done nothing, and then the investigation would have been fruitless, and he would be declared innocent, and he never would have been caught. But even if he did decide to plant that messenger, he could have had the messenger lie, which he didn't. The messenger told them exactly where the secret location was. He could have had his army ambush them instead of ambushing them himself, which he also didn't do. He decided to personally ambush them. And he decides to let them set the terms. I know they came to his secret lair, but they're still setting the terms. They could have gotten as many reinforcements as they wanted before showing up. Tarrlok and the other council members could have shown up. Anybody could have shown up. What was he going to fucking do if the fleet and literally every armed member showed up because they have intel that there are weapons being stored underneath his mansion? Like, what was his plan? He just had to do literally nothing and he would have been fine. How was he going to deal with this kind of opposition?
Why would there be fence posts but no fence?
So Korra is a complicated show. There are a lot of pieces moving at any one time, and for that reason, there's a lot to like and dislike about it, I think. Most of the play-by-play stuff seems to check out. There are just a lot of conveniences, and the conveniences in Season 1's case come in the form of characters spontaneously behaving in exactly the way they would need to progress the story. You could make compelling arguments that there are reasons for all of the characters acting absolutely stupid, like they did in the examples I provided, except for maybe the fence situation. But the thing is that you also have to keep in mind the stakes and what happens as a result. With Amon, even though it's incredibly, unbelievably convenient that he just happened to waterbend his way out of the water in such a flashy fashion as to expose who he really is, you could still make the argument that it was a gut reaction, because the show has established in its own vague way that benders are very different from one another, and some of them can do things others can't. Amon is an example of that, given that he can bloodbend when there's no full moon. Yes, that's a lore thing. You'll have to watch the show if you want to know what I'm talking about. And if you want me to be extremely generous, we can say it's possible he just didn't even think about the utility of actually burning his face. It seems unlikely, given how calculating the show tries to portray him and how seriously he takes his crusade, but we can say that. But keep in mind the stakes. The primary antagonist was exposed and his crusade is in ruins because he got knocked into some water, gut reactioned his way into exposing himself right in front of everyone, and he just happened to not think to actually burn his face and instead use paint that washes off in water to hold his story together. Even if that's believable, he's still being stupid, and it's a little unsatisfying, right? Now, conveniences are not plot holes, character behavior is not a plot hole, and it's not like the show is awful because of this, but it is a little too much. Too often in the show, things just happen to work out for the good guys, even though they have no right to. And then with Tarrlok, there are so many ways to read Tarrlok's character. Maybe the most complicated guy in the fucking season. And you could argue that he has trouble with accepting when he doesn't get what he wants. And you could argue that the gifts he sent to Korra to try and convince her to join his task force are a symbol of that impatience, but I think that's really pushing it when you consider how much he had to fucking lose. There was just too much riding on it for him to make such a stupid decision. And the fact is that him attacking Korra is what moves basically the entire latter half of the plot forward in Season 1. Barring him having some kind of stroke and literally forgetting his overarching goals, which I'm not going to completely rule out, that might have happened, I can't see how this makes sense, how it makes sense to write Tarrlok this way. I'm not saying it makes the show bad, or that the character can't have made that decision, because, again, he's a complicated dude, but considering the scale of what it cost him and how he's portrayed previously in the show, I do think it's a little unreasonable. And then with Hiroshi, you can argue pretty easily that Hiroshi was just overexcited to get rid of these dumbass benders snooping around in his business, and he wants to test out his cool new mechs because the Judgment Day is coming, the Equalists are going to take over the city, and he's tired of waiting and he's going to fuck them up now. You could totally read Hiroshi's character that way, and you could say that's why he made the bad decisions he did, because he just really wanted to kill some benders. But it put the entire operation at risk because he did that, and then he continues to do stupid things like climb out of his mech and make himself vulnerable, even though all he did was knock out the opposition. They could get back up at any second, dude. And then I have just like this general list of stuff that happens in Korra that's a little too convenient and seems to only exist to move the story forward. Like, a lot of people get knocked out for exactly the right amount of time. It's absurd how many times people get knocked unconscious and wake up at just the right time to move the story forward again. You have no idea who has what chance of winning a fight at any given time. Like, you'd think after watching the characters fight so many times, you might have an idea of who has the upper hand in general combat, but you never really get a sense of who might win, which is unfortunate. Characters say and do things with disturbing levels of unfounded confidence, and Korra is the only person this really matches. Like, it makes sense for her to be like that, but not everybody should be like that when it's convenient to move the story forward. And people just believe what other people say all the time in the show. Even when it's incredibly high stakes, sometimes they'll just believe each other without asking any follow-up questions or showing any skepticism. And lastly, this one is not really a big deal for me, but they kind of erase the idea of the good guys suffering any consequences of the battle. Like, at the very end, everything is alright again. Korra gets her bending back. Everybody else who lost their bending can get their bending back from Korra because her past selves appeared and magically gave her the ability to heal all of the bad stuff Amon did. All of the things you thought were permanent consequences are not permanent consequences. They never mattered. Everything's fine, everyone's happy, and the villains are gone. And I want to end by saying I really enjoyed watching Season 1 of Legend of Korra. I enjoy most stuff I consume, even the things that I kind of dislike, I still enjoy experiencing, if that makes sense. And Legend of Korra is a complicated show with a whole fuck ton of moving pieces, and it was a lot to get out in just 12 episodes. That being said, Season 1 seems almost perfectly self-contained, so I'm just gonna drop out of the show here, but I had a good time.